All right, good afternoon, everyone. I am Ryan Pittman. I'm the Director of Public Policy here at the Greater Des Moines Partnership. Thank you for joining us in person and online today. For attendees online, we just ask you to place any questions for the panel into the chat or questions feature, and I'll be able to send those questions over to Janae near the end of the program if we have time. I first want to go ahead and cover our civility pledge. So the partnership, we work with the Robert D. Billy Ray Center at Drake University on the Show Some Respect campaign. With that in mind, I would like to take a moment to remind everyone the importance of civility in today's events. Advancing meaningful conversation requires respect. At the partnership, we urge all Iowans to engage in active listening and to be courteous as they express their opinions about issues. Together, we can have tough conversations in a respectful way and find common ground solutions. As an organization, the goal of the public policy issue forums are to educate the broad audience on policy topics so more people can understand the issues and advocate to our elected officials. For 2023, we have 6 issue forums scheduled to take place every other month on the 3rd Thursday of every month at noon. And we are excited to cover more topics throughout the year, including our upcoming one on placemaking, rural development, healthcare, and we'll finish strong with the Iowa caucuses. And of course, we'll cover workforce readiness today. Each year, the partnership's Government Policy Council develops a state and federal policy agenda, and the policy team uses those agendas to advocate throughout the year. In our 2023 state policy agenda, we recognize that talent remains a top issue identified by Greater Des Moines Partnership investors and members. The partnership supports state-led programs and policies, including Future Ready Iowa, that builds Iowa's talent pipeline and provides work-based learning opportunities for students. In addition, the partnership believes talent recruitment and retention initiatives are key to growing Iowa's workforce, including policies that ensures Iowa continues to be a welcoming place that is open for business. The federal policy agenda, which was just announced today, so we're gearing up for DC and going to talk a little bit about it in today's panel. But the partnership supports legislative changes to the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, FAFSA, Simplification Act, which I'm sure we'll cover today as it's a hot topic, including reintroduction of the number of families in colleges and exclusion of the network of small business owners and family farms from the Student Aid Index formula. I am not the expert on this conversation. I love to learn about it, and I love to be in conversations and work on advocating for the policies that can make a difference in Iowa. But I will turn it over to our experts to begin this conversation by starting with our partnership own moderator, Janae Sickning. Janae is the Senior Vice President of Talent Development at the Greater Des Moines Partnership, leading the organization's talent recruitment, retainment strategies, and business education partnerships. Janae is passionate about supporting talent and creating student opportunities here in DSM USA. Her background includes private higher education, nonprofit strategic management, political campaigns, and state government. Janae, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. Well, I am so excited for today's conversation. I am kind of a secret public policy junkie and like to read legislation for fun. And I think today's conversation is going to be a great mashup of what's happening at the state level, also what's happening at the federal level, and how federal policy can impact state policy. So let's go ahead and get started and introduce today's panelists. We're joined today by leaders in building the talent pipeline and really experts in research and authors of policy and programming here in Iowa. So thank you for joining us today. I'd like to start by welcoming Noelle Nelson of Avenue Scholars in Des Moines. Noelle serves as the Executive Director of Avenue Scholars in Des Moines. Avenue Scholars was founded in Omaha. in 2008 by Walter Scott and Dr. Ken Bird with a mission to bridge the gap between education and business for students of hope and need. Noelle is leading the expansion of the program in the Des Moines Metro, beginning at East and Roosevelt High Schools, and has spent the last 23 years serving as a teacher, curriculum coordinator, administrator, and most recently as the executive director of leadership and learning for the Des Moines Public Schools. She is passionate about equity of access for all scholars and has committed her career to removing barriers for our most marginalized groups. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you. Second, we have Terry Voss with the WorkSmart Connector. Terry leads the work-based learning for the WorkSmart Connector, which is a collaboration of employers and educators and communities in Marion County, Iowa. WorkSmart Connector connects area talent to local careers in partnership with the Career Academy of Pella and Central College. So students K through 16 are engaged in pathways through career awareness and exploration, work-based learning experiences, employment, and personal growth. She is a longtime advocate for Iowa's workforce and led the development of Iowa's high school registered apprenticeship playbook in 2018. Under Terry's direction, the WorkSmart Connector has also been recognized as a STEM Best Model, which is a program of Iowa Governor's STEM Advisory Council, and through which she continues to provide mentor services as well. So Terry serves on the Governor's STEM Advisory Council, the Central Iowa Workforce Development Board, and chairs Pella's Workforce Development Council. So I know her passion for community development and students. Thank you, Terry, for being here today. And finally, last but not least, I'm excited to introduce Mark Wiederspan. Dr. Mark Wiederspan is the Executive Director of Iowa College Aid. He leads Iowa College Aid's efforts to advocate for and support Iowans as they explore, finance, and complete educational opportunities beyond high school. He was previously a faculty member at Arizona State University. His area of expertise includes higher education policy with a focus on the optimal design of financial aid programs, economics of education, educational pathways to college, and examination of personal and institutional barriers to college persistence and completion. His research has been published in the Journal of Higher Education, National Text Journal, Economics of Education Review. He earned his BA in Political Science from Nebraska Wesleyan University, his MA and PhD in Higher Education Administration from the University of Michigan Center for the Study of Higher and Post-Secondary Education. And I will tell you, he has given me a masterclass on financial aid. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. First, I would like to turn it over to the panel for opening remarks. Noelle, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so thank you. I think down the agenda a little bit, or down the questions, I have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about Avenue Scholars, but having had one foot in the education world and now one foot in bridging to the business community, I think that we've historically had a missed opportunity to be in the same room together. So interestingly, I get invited to two very distinctly different spaces on a fairly regular basis. So I'll meet with educators, and all of the educators are talking about this issue. And then I'll meet with business leaders, and the business leaders are talking about this issue. Rarely do I see them in the same room talking together. So we hope to bridge that gap. Right now in Des Moines Public Schools, Future Ready Iowa data indicate that about 65% of our students indicate an intent to enroll in some kind of post-secondary education, not including registered apprenticeships, but just post-secondary education after high school. Of those, about 50%, a little more than 50% will actually enroll. And of the 50% who actually enroll, only about 25% will complete. So I think it's in all of our best interest to look at and examine and what are those barriers that are either preventing kids from enrolling, what other options are they pursuing if they're not enrolling, and probably most importantly, what supports need to be in place to ensure completion rates. So otherwise they're just amassing debt and no further ahead. So Avenue Scholars really focuses on a support system, both in high school and through post-secondary and all the way to career placement to ensure our kids are getting through. And then if you look at work-based learning opportunities, internships, traditionally speaking, it's changing, but traditionally speaking, where do those opportunities exist? College, like junior, senior year, right? So if you look at it and examine who's getting access to work-based learning opportunities via internships, those are typically happening junior or senior year. Well, who's in that pipeline by the time they're juniors and seniors? It's not always the kids that we need in those pipelines, and it's certainly not our most diverse population. So as we're trying to look at workforce development And all the business leaders that I'm talking to are saying we want a more representative group of individuals through our pipeline. We have to look at those structures that are contributing to the pipelines that we're getting. So that's what I'm passionate about. That's what we're working on, and always seeking partnerships to do that work. Sorry if that was too long.
No, that's great.
I can repeat a lot of the things that you said, so thank you for making the comments that you did. I too have worked through WorkSmart Connector, building collaboration and bridges between employers, the business community, and education. I spent most of my career in manufacturing, working in PR, communications, and education, and helping young people find their way into one particular industry. And now I find myself getting more familiar and accustomed to the education side. And as you mentioned, they're so often in separate spaces. But when they find themselves in the same spaces, there's so much effective collaboration going on. And sometimes it's even just the language. There are two different languages even that the groups are speaking. So having them in one place or on the same page to talk about how we best create pipelines for these young people, that's where magic happens, and that's where I find myself often spending time. So I find that to be a real blessing, because you can see the opportunities there. The other thing that I would mention is we don't want to put students under more pressure or anxiety about making decisions early, but yet there are ways that we can expose students to what could happen in the future that they've not currently had the opportunity to engage in. And that's what I get really excited about when it comes to work-based learning. It's not just that first work experience, it's all the exposures and the things that they can learn about the workplace from the time that they're very young, bringing employers into the classrooms, letting students go into the workplaces and have tours. All that visibility and connectivity that can happen only gives them more security and ambition and excitement, enthusiasm about what happens after high school. So I think the more that we can create that enthusiasm, the more we get young people to consider local careers, and that only helps the Iowa economy and communities. So that's going to be a little bit of my angle today. Thank you.
Mention the economy and turn it over to Mark.
Hey.
for opening remarks.
Yeah, so one thing, I just want to at least help facilitate the conversation, and just at least give you guys an idea of what we are facing here in Iowa when it comes to post-secondary attainment, and then how it has a ripple effect onto our workforce. So one, the trends were discussed. Noelle really did a good job of highlighting that sort of we have high, as a state, a very high school graduation rate. We have a somewhat high post-secondary intent, but yet we have a very low college attainment rate, like people actually going into college. I think the thing that's more distressing is that over time, I would say over the last decade, we have seen a gradual decrease amongst our high school students having the intent of going to a post-secondary degree, as well as actually enrolling in college, right? So for the class of 2012, I think it was around 81% had indicated that they had some sort of post-secondary intent. By 2021, granted, we do have some COVID issues, it was only 72% that were interested in getting a post-secondary degree, which is down a little bit from the class of 2020, we're only 75%, right? I think what's really troubling about those sort of trends, even though we're seeing a decline, is that if we were to aggregate it out and look a little bit more of, there's significant gaps of intent and actual college enrollment here in Iowa, particularly amongst our free and reduced price lunch and our non-free and reduced price lunch. Both are declining, but the gap between those two are significantly increasing. And the same thing can be said for our white and minority students. We're noticing a noticeable trend and gap of intent and actually of actual enrollment. Now, some of you are going to ask, why do these gaps exist? Well, there's not one specific explanation, but I'll just give you 3 or 4 broad explanations that research has told us. First is the academic preparedness. I mean, I don't want to put blame on high schools or anything like that, but just that students are just not academically prepared for post-secondary education. The second reason is the finance reason, right? College is just becoming more expensive. We're not funding enough in grants to cover tuition. Students are relying more on student loan debt, and people want to be loan averse and not take on that debt. The third explanation we could just also attribute to that many students have information deficits. I know that sounds negative, but they just have information constraints. Going to college, or the process of making your decision on what you want to do after high school, is not an easy decision. There's volumes of books and research that demonstrate that the college choice decision or the post-secondary choice decision is not necessarily linear. And it's not one thing that you wake up one day and say, oh, I'm going to do this. No, there's a decision process that you have to go through. And as you're going through the decision, there's certain steps that you need to take, right? You need to, first of all, let's just take an easy example of wanting to go to college. Oh, I want to go to college. Okay, I have to seek out which college do I want to go to. Okay, if I want to go to this college, I have to fill out the FAFSA. I also need to fill out the college application itself. College may also require me to write an essay. I might also have to take the ACT or some sort of standardized test. You can see that there are significant barriers or steps that individuals have to take. And because of those barriers, I wouldn't say we're pushing people out, but some individuals can't overcome those barriers to make their college choice decision. And I think we just also have to recognize that, so that really explains the gap. Why is there just an overall decline in college intent and actual enrollment? There's a number of factors that attribute to it. I think one of the most predominant ones is that we're seeing significant public opinion about post-secondary education dwindling over the last couple of years, especially in light of the pandemic. And now I say all this because where am I leading us to? I'm leading us to this notion that we have been anticipating that for some time that there's going to be sort of a cliff in the number of individuals that will be going into the workforce because of like the birth dearth during the Great Recession. And this is somewhat troubling for our workforce because as the baby boomer generation retires out, are we going to have enough skilled individuals to take their place, right? And not to go on a little bit more of a lecture, but if you look at the history of America, we've always been defined by revolutions, right? The American Revolution, Agricultural Revolution, Industrial Revolution, Tech Revolution. Some have sort of posited that we might be on the precipice of a jobs revolution, right? That, part of this revolution is that individuals are, we're seeing a change in the workforce landscape of how you actually work in the office, at home, hybrid. But a part of it also is just this idea of, are we going to have enough skilled individuals to replace other individuals as they're retired? And so, yes, there's a sort of a rippling effect that if we don't take a charge, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing, but if we don't do something to address those gaps, to address the decline, it spills over to our workforce and we may not have the individuals to fill those spots. Yep.
Iowa College Aid has really great early indicators for the future of the talent pipeline, as you can see from Mark's remarks. And so we're going to be focusing today on the early part of the talent pipeline and creating student opportunities and what that looks like and talking about that. Mark mentioned skills gaps and educational attainment. So I want to start our conversation by discussing Future Ready Up. I think a lot of us have heard about. Governor Branstad created this via executive order in 2016, and it was really the goal was to create to have 75% of Iowa's workforce have education or training beyond high school by the year 2025. So we're getting closer to 2025, and since then there's been a flurry of work to build talent recruitment and retention efforts to fill these skills gaps that have been mentioned here already. So I'd like to start with your thoughts on where we've been and where you think we should go. So what do you see as the most successful efforts of Future Ready Iowa? And what more should the state be doing to fill the middle skills job gap? So I'll open it up for the entire panel. Who would like to start?
I can go. Great. I have to say something before two really smart people to my left take all of my. So I think one thing that I was done well in conversations that we have on a daily basis with young people in our program is even though a 4-year degree seeking path is a good option, it's not the only option, especially when we're working with students who are experiencing poverty. I'm surprised in the research that you listed, I agreed just anecdotally with all of the reasons why students aren't enrolling, but a large one, at least based on my experience, is economics with I need to earn money now, either for myself or for my family. So one of the things that I really appreciate about Future Ready Iowa, knowing that skills are the future compensation over, in some cases, degrees, how do we build those skills? And that might happen through directly going right into the workforce, as long as you're going into a position that allows for that professional growth and that training and the acquisition of those skills. It might be going straight into a registered apprenticeship and getting those training opportunities and getting paid while you learn. Not all students, as we know, have the luxury of just studying for 4 years and going to college without that wage. And then just honoring also, you might go straight to work for an employer, especially in our healthcare system, and all of those trainings and certifications can be offered at no cost to the employee to acquire that education. So I think I appreciate, as a person who went to college for literally 16 years, it seems like, I appreciate that we're putting other options in front of our students, because I think that's how we expand our workforce ready, especially when we're talking about the need being at those middle skill level jobs. They don't all require a 4-year degree. They might only require a certificate or a license. And so taking the shame out of that it's not a less than path. And then we also educate our parents, who are obviously a key player in how they're advising their students.
Sarah, you've been kind of at the groundwork of Future Ready Iowa. What do you think are the successes and where the opportunities?
I might be a little bit biased, but I would say that registered apprenticeships in our area and our community that's been a real win, because it's, in all this conversation about hybrid work environments, an apprenticeship can be a real hybrid or a real bridge to bridge the gap between high school and whether it be a 4-year degree, a 2-year degree, or directly into the workforce. The apprenticeship can accommodate all of those different things. So when we first got started, it's kind of interesting, the term STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, there was a time not too long ago that was not all that familiar of an acronym. You would say that to kids or to adults, and they were like, well, what does STEM mean? I feel that same way about both Future Ready Iowa. It's becoming and has become recognized as a term and really becoming a goal for a lot of business and industry and education across the state. The same is true of apprenticeship. It wasn't that long ago that word, and we're still having that conversation. Well, what is apprenticeship? I've not heard of that. Isn't that something that happened long time ago in Europe or something? And now it's becoming a recognizable pathway for young people. And so that is the one thing that I would say has become a real win in terms of Future Ready Iowa, and one of the initiatives that they're getting really involved in, because students have to commit to both the learning in a more academic setting, but also the learning on the job. And so really it's those two things that, in my opinion, set students apart for future employment, train them in a really unique way, and it accommodates students of all demographics and some of those that have the barriers that you mentioned. It allows for them in a unique way to achieve those higher goals that they may have. So that would be the thing that I would really speak to in terms of a Future Ready Iowa.
So Future Ready Iowa, the one thing I can really speak more about than anything is we administer the last dollar scholarship. Is everybody familiar with that? If not, I will just, part of Future Ready Iowa and the state and Governor Reynolds, they fund what's called the last dollar scholarship. And essentially it allows an individual to attend a community college, or even there's a couple independent colleges where it allows you to get an associate degree in a occupation or program of study that leads to a high demand job. And you can go to that school tuition free. We will cover 100% of the tuition through that last dollar scholarship. I would say that it's been very successful because I'm speaking from the financial aspect. We're always hitting the mark. We're always constantly, whatever money is always being appropriated into it, we're spending it. And we've seen significant growth in the number of participants in that program. And I can tell you anecdotally a story of the importance of that program, and is several years ago, or no, a year ago, on 4th of July, my air conditioner went out. And it was a very hot day, July 4th, and the air conditioner guy came to my house to fix my air conditioner. Naturally, I felt bad because it was July 4th, and just strike up a conversation with him, like, how did you get into this? Well, what happened? And he goes, well, I got, funding through this program called the Last Dollar Scholarship that paid for my tuition to go into air conditioning. And I thought, that's amazing. In my most dire need, I can see success in that program. Maybe. So that's one aspect, is that we're seeing significant growth in our Last Dollar Scholarship program and growth in those programs and studies. As a result of that, I can't sit there and say that this is causal, but we are noticing that there's a strong correlation in the Last Dollar Scholarship, that we actually are seeing a decline in student loan debt at some community colleges because of that Last Dollar Scholarship. So I think that's a very important aspect to mention. Can't say it's causal, but it's definitely correlational, because the decline happened with the introduction of the Last Dollar Scholarship. The other thing that I just also want to say that's been very positive is that Iowa College Aid has also received funding from Governor Reynolds through her ARP funds to support Gear Up, which we've renamed Future Ready Iowa Gear Up, where we target we target school districts where there is a very high percentage of students on free or reduced price lunch. And so the intent is to assist those students through the college decision process. I keep on saying college decision. What I really mean is post-secondary. I mean, even though Iowa College Aid is in our name, we're really about promoting post-secondary, military, certificates, apprenticeships. We're all about promoting that. So please don't stick me to my word if I say college. I'm actually also referring to post-secondary. But Gear Up is to assist those individuals through the post-secondary decision process. And again, we're noticing preliminarily results that we are seeing sort of an uptick in our Gear Up students in college going rates. So.
Really glad about your air conditioner.
Yeah.
That is a great anecdote.
How much did you pay?
It was a pretty petty, but knowing he was there, like,
It's well qualified,
Yeah.
yes. Yes, Noelle, I'd like to go back to you in regards to Future Ready Iowa, because I think there's a good correlation here with Avenue Scholars. Can you tell us about the mission of Avenue Scholars, how the program works to identify and really close that gap between education and business and high demand industries?
Yeah, so we started in 2008 in Omaha. It was under the Suzanne and Walter Scott Foundation, and at that point in time, it was a response to a community need. A report was released that Omaha was one of the worst places in the country to be a Black male as far as outcomes go. So they really wanted to do something different, and what can we do to both serve our community and serve the students who need it the most. And so the vision was originally that let's target students in high need areas, let's get them into a support system, and then with the goal being a 4-year degree attainment. The results were abysmal those first few years. There were so many reasons why we can't just plug students into a 4-year degree pathway and expect success if all of those foundational pieces haven't applied in their entire pre-K-12 experience. So we've modified the model, which is what it is now. Mid-American Energy actually brought it to the Des Moines area. Catherine Cooner has been one of our leaders of making sure that this program gets off to a good start. We're fully funded by Mid-American for now, but we're looking to diversify our funding sources in the future. But essentially what we do is we go into our high schools and we find hungry, motivated kids who maybe don't have the dream of doing the 4-year. They know they want to have a meaningful career. They know they need to do something after high school. But maybe their sights are not set on a 4-year pathway. So we take them through a lot of career exploration. We're embedded in the schools. So we have a career coach for every 25 kids in our schools right now. And they come to us every day. We have a curriculum that walks them through financial literacy, resume writing. We take them through discovering their passions and their strengths, being able to talk about their passions and their strengths, seeing their diversity and their language diversity as an asset and not a detriment. We're always talking to our kids, 50% of our kids are bilingual. It's like, do you know how huge that is for you as a future employee to be bilingual? It's nothing to be ashamed of that your English is your second language. So we foster those strengths and really take them through. That's a lot of junior year. We go through career exploration, career awareness. Senior year is really where the rubber starts to hit the road with work-based learning. We try to always do a paid internship in the summer. Mary Core is one of our business outreach coordinators, and she's done a tremendous job of getting businesses on board with what we do, to say, will you host a student? We give them a chance, knowing they come with a support system. And so we're really trying to get them immersed in those careers earlier so they can decide what they want to do. Then our goal is obviously graduation on time. 98% of our kids will typically graduate on time as compared to about 75% in our free and reduced population. And all of our kids, I should say, are identified because they qualify for free and reduced lunch. And then we'll usher them into their post-secondary plans. And so we try, our hope is that they'll go into one of our 5 industries as a result of our support. So we have IT, skilled trades, automotive, business, and health sciences. Those will evolve as our community needs evolve, but right now there's clear needs in all of those areas. So then they're assigned a post-secondary career coach. That person will help them navigate. We have a partnership with DMAC. We try to get them to go to DMAC if that makes sense for them. They don't have to go to DMAC. They might go straight to the workforce. But success for us is that they land a full-time career. They have access to a livable wage, and I think in Iowa, that's like what, $19 an hour or more. They have access to benefits, health insurance, retirement plan, opportunities for upward mobility. So that's what we call alum status, of how we said, okay, this has worked for this student. If they do choose to go to DMAC, they get to go free of charge. It's fully funded scholarships. We'll pay for their tools, we'll pay for their boots, we'll pay for their scrubs, whatever it might be, to remove those financial barriers. So that's a lot, but that's essentially what we do. It's 5 years of support for an individual student and into about 6 months into their first career placement.
Thank you, Noelle. Terry, I want to turn to you. And what I want to talk about, you're really future cast apprenticeships. No one knows apprenticeships better than you, I would argue. What does the future hold for apprenticeships in Iowa? And why is it important to the business?
Well, you would be surprised if I didn't say anything, but there's a very bright future for apprenticeships, right?
That's great.
I would say that apprenticeships are really changing the way employers are thinking in a good way. And that's largely because what we used to consider middle skills, I think today we're even using terms like middle skills, they're becoming essential skills. And even go so far as to say essential technical skills. And employers recognize that. They realize that they have to bring in young people in a unique way and help them gain those skills if they don't already have them. And apprenticeship does find that middle ground because I'm just going to speak in general terms, this can vary a lot, but they're required to come into the workplace with about 144 plus hours of training. And then they go into the workplace, getting to 2,000 more, often more working hours where they're learning and trade while they're doing it. That is done under the wing of a mentor. So this is someone that knows the trade, knows the skill, and they're really helping this young person understand firsthand what it is to do the job. So that makes it personal and effective in a way that hasn't necessarily been done a lot in the past. And employers are telling me that one of the most gratifying things for them is that these young people are coming in without preconceived notions about how something is supposed to be done. They're coming in to learn, and then they are bold enough to often share their perspectives on how things are done. So it's bringing new innovation into the workplace too, which employers are just hungry for. And some of the things that I've seen by way of example, these employers are learning from young people. I think of we have a patient care registered apprenticeship, for example. And we have students who go through the basic and then advanced CNA training. And through the process, they're also working within long-term care facilities or hospital environments. And our hospital recently came to me and said, we initiated a brand new role in our organization because of what we're seeing in the apprenticeships. And I was like, well, what do you mean? They said, well, we've never had a patient care specialist role, but because of this young lady that came in and showed us how good she was at communication and caring and just being that go-to person for our residents and patients, we are going to start opening up a patient care specialist role. And we didn't even know we needed that until she was here. So I think that is just a glimpse of what is going to happen more and more in the future. And like this employer too said, it wouldn't have happened unless we had been able to start this relationship with this young lady and the other apprenticeships with her and listen to them too. So it's a two-way street, and that's why it's becoming such an advantage to everyone involved. And there aren't necessarily some of the barriers that both of you have mentioned in the past. These young people are being paid while they're potentially going to college, while they're working, and the employers have been great about helping them balance that workload. And because it's becoming such a hybrid space, to use that term, like I said earlier, that we typically think about office or work at home, it's becoming a hybrid space for the way students learn and how employers grow their skill sets. So that's only going to become a growing avenue.
Well, I think what you've seen here is we have two phenomenal leaders who are boots on the ground in programming and student impact for workforce readiness. So thank you both for what you do in these spaces. Mark, I want to turn it now to the federal level and bring you into the conversation in terms as to what we're seeing there. I know Ryan mentioned just released our federal policy this morning, and that includes the FAFSA Simplification Act. Would you give us, I know this will be hard to briefly, but a high-level overview for what you're seeing in terms of FAFSA simplification and why there are impacts with the FAFSA that could affect us here in Iowa? Students.
Sure. So first, we keep on saying FAFSA. Let me, it stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Okay. Has anyone had the opportunity to fill that out yet? All right. Okay. So you know the pain. So it is the application that, as it says, is that you fill out to receive financial aid, such as the Pell Grant, student loans. That's also the form that many institutions also use to determine your eligibility for institutional aid. As a state level, we also use that form to determine your eligibility for state aid. You guys have a separate application, or do you guys do you guys use the FAFSA method? Oh yeah, okay. So essentially what you do on that form is when you fill it out, you put information about your income. You put your information about your assets, your parent and the student. Put information about your assets, such as retirement savings, how much money you have cash on hand. You put all that information like you would on a 1040, an IRS tax form, and at the end of it, it spits out a number called the expected family contribution. Now, that expected family contribution is the money that the federal government has determined that you can contribute to your family member's education. Okay, so if you're zero, that means they expect you not to contribute anything. And if you have 7,000, 10,000, that's money that you're expected to contribute. That EFC, that expected family contribution, is what we use to determine eligibility for financial aid. Okay. Now, as I said earlier, have any of you filled it out? And a lot of you shook your head and didn't look too happy about it. Congress tried to make it easier to fill out. They wanted to make it so much easier because evidence has shown that that form is a barrier to going to college. And so in the process, what they have done is they've introduced new methods to make the application more simple. The biggest one being is that you can take your data from the IRS and automatically import to the FAFSA and it's completed. Now, as a result of this new FAFSA, there's going to be a new calculation that determines what I said, that EFC, right? Under it is now, under the EFC, it does not take into account family farms and small businesses that have less than 100 employees. You do not need to report that as an asset. But under the new formula, it will require you to report the net worth of family farms and small assets. And that information is going to calculate what's called a student aid index. But essentially, it's going to be the same thing. It's still an EFC, we've just given it a different name. The concern that Iowa College Aid has been having is that many of our farmers and even small businesses may appear to be asset rich. Because the net worth for a family farm is going to include your silos, your grain, the combines. Combines cost, $400,000. I mean, they're expensive, right? And so it may appear that they're asset rich but cash poor. And our fear is that if you include it, that EFC measure is going to jump up dramatically. And we've gone through some simulations to recalculate the formula. And what we have found is, just for an example, a family that makes $60,000 under the EFC formula, their EFC would be about $7,000. That doesn't include the family farm and small business. But when you include the family farm and small business, and let's just say you have the net worth of $1 million, which is not unheard of, that EFC or SAI measure jumps up to about $40,000, right? So there is a significant jump on the expectation of one being expected to pay for college. And so Iowa College Aid has been working diligently with Janae and others to really bring it out that this is coming down the pipeline. This is going to be happening for starting in October, December of this year for the following, so it would be for 24, 25. So we want to make it very clear that individuals are going to have to report this on the FAFSA now. And we're working with our Iowa delegation to basically revert back to what it is, where we exclude the family farm and small business from the calculation. Now, I've been checking my phone during this meeting, and it's not because I'm trying to be rude, but Senator Ernst is in the process of dropping a bill. She's made it very vocal that she would like the family farm and small business to be excluded. I was hoping to come in here and be like, oh, she's done it, but she hasn't. I at least looking at my email, I haven't seen that. So does that help, or is there?
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you. Like I said, master class and putting and really what you're talking about is college affordability, accessibility, as it relates long-term, while also bringing in your earlier remarks about how there's this demographic cliff that's coming our way within the state. So a lot of pieces to consider, and if you press one lever, it impacts another lever in higher ed, and it's a very complicated web. So thank you for simplifying it very easily. I'm going to end this question, and we'll open it up to the panel and to the room and to those on chat. But what do you think is the greatest opportunity to impact the future talent pipeline within our region? Would you like to start?
Sure. Okay, great. Well, I'm biased, but the power of internships for our young people in work-based learning, I think that's the way to truly get them into that career exploration. We have data from Gen Z that was shared at, I think it was events from Tallow, and 70% of these young people in this demographic are making decisions about future employers while they're still in high school and early college. So how do they make informed choices without actually stepping foot in those future industries that they're desiring? Or on the other hand, eliminating, it goes both ways, right? So if we can get our local businesses to think a little more broadly about what work-based learning and internships might look like, and consider responsible supported high school students as part of that, and looking beyond just college internships, I think that we can grab those kids, instill some hope, help them define a clear vision for their future, so that they see a reason to sustain their post-secondary plans. In my opinion, we're accessing them too late, and we're certainly not accessing the kids that we've already lost. So we gotta start earlier.
And I would add to that too, starting earlier and giving those work-based learning opportunities, but I would also say connecting the dots. So I think so often you can talk to families or even talk to parents, and they're not aware of what their students, what the results of their career assessments have been, or some of the different things that they get in high school. But what dots are being connected for them then to take the next step and actually be able to pursue those opportunities. So it is so often about helping young people, not just giving them some random tools, but help them use those tools in an effective way on a continuum. So when they're younger, they're meeting people that look like them, that are in roles that they'd like to be in someday. When they get a little older and they're taking those assessments, not just packing those in a backpack or an electronic file, but keep coming back to those year after year, so that they find themselves easing into those places where they're bound to be the most successful. So I think connecting the dots, and I've seen firsthand too, is having all those entities come together, include the community, the economic development group, the Chamber of Commerce, help, everyone working together to create solutions brings the endeavor a lot further along down the path. So it's really, to me, about collaboration, starting early on and connecting the dots.
I can't add too much to what they've already said. I think the only thing I would add is just the mode at which we're interacting. And I think it's just any opportunity to provide one-on-one. We've done a lot of research at Iowa College Aid, a lot of our programs. We've tried to determine what's the best way to interact with students, and really it comes down to in-person, one-on-one. And I think that's just the greatest opportunity, is to provide those sort of one-on-one or in-person meetings or opportunities to really explain to the individual what opportunities exist is the most effective means of helping our future talent, helping with our future talent. So, yeah.
We'll open up for questions in the room. Are there questions on Zoom? Yeah, Mark.
Mark, I have a real quick question for you. Can you tell everybody about the ETV educational training voucher? I'm not sure if really anybody knows about it.
Yeah.
And then also in your response, if you could let us know what the status of this year's, or actually next year's appropriation is.
Okay, so for ETV, it's the educational training voucher. It's actually a federal program, and it is for foster youth. That is also one of the programs that we help administer at Iowa College Aid. I can't give you the specific dollar amount of how much we allocate towards that.
5,000.
Is it 5,000? Okay. No, but the total overall, I don't know. But essentially, yes, that is a for students that age out of the foster care system. And what was your second appropriation?
Is the money going to be there next year?
I don't know. Yeah, we're still waiting to see it, but I would imagine it will be. I mean, it's just one of those things we still have to wait and see, but I have a feeling that it will still maintain at least status quo funding to continue. So.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm curious because the Senate recently, or the Iowa Senate recently loosened child labor laws here. And what would you all want employers to think about who might be interested in taking advantage of that? What are some considerations?
Yeah, we actually just had a conversation about that, and I know just enough to be dangerous, knowing that bill has changed quite a bit. So I haven't dug into the final version. However, a story about where that could go dangerously wrong is, while in general, we believe that it will help free up opportunities for more work-based learning. But it puts, I believe, some of our most marginalized groups at risk of being taken advantage of. So an example of that, we have a young lady in our program, her name is Haley Yendo. She has taken it upon herself to get both her CNA and her advanced CNA while in high school. Applied to one of our local hospitals. She was excited about the opportunity and they offered her a night shift. And so it was her plan to work all night long, try to go to school, maintain activities, grades, all of that. And had it not been for our intervention, we would have been like, whoa, no, you can't do this. This isn't a good idea. She needed the money, her family needed the money. So that's what I worry about. That's probably an extreme example. So I asked some of the employers in the room, what's being done, regardless of what the laws say, are you having conversations about ethics of what's appropriate, especially for our most at-risk teens, and to prevent them from being exploited, really. So they assured me that those discussions were happening, but how that plays out, you know. And I understand the workforce needs, I absolutely do. So it's a challenge.
Thank you.
No, go ahead, Amy, you gotta.
Yeah, but there definitely are those concerns that I think everyone has to stay on top of, and I was going to say safety has to come first. No matter what the age, it also depends on the maturity of the student. And so the employers have to really be committed to safety, and that's a conversation we have with all of our employers too, before they can even come on board. And some of them, regardless, a lot of them actually that I deal with, regardless of legislation, they have their own line in terms of age. So I do think we have to be careful of those things. We also have to really continue to emphasize to everyone involved that we pay attention to the students' maturity and level of education and awareness before they go into workplace, regardless of their age.
I don't know the specific details of that bill, but the one thing that at least my conversations around the office and just with other state agencies, the one thing that I always just say is that, and I think of everything in the higher education lens. So this is not just limited to this conversation, it's also guns, you know, other things that happen on a college campus, but really what's the impact of this on our state's attainment rate? Because if you look at what has been attributed to our national attainment rate has been our child labor laws, compulsory education laws, right? Those are sort of the bedrock for boosting our nation's education attainment rate. So that's the only thing I worry about is just, is it going to make us less educated? But I have no way to know because I haven't really seen the bill, but that's just my immediate thought with regards to it.
Well, and I'm still confused on how it will work, given that federal legislation hasn't been changed, but state legislation is looser. So assuming federal trumps state, but is it only a matter of if it gets enforced? I don't know. So it's all very confusing to me of how this plays out. So other questions from the room? Okay, well, I will give the panel an opportunity to do final closing thoughts in about 20 seconds. So, Noel, would you like to start? Yeah, I'm not sure that there's anything that I didn't get to address. I think the biggest maybe takeaway is in the DEI realm. I'm very passionate about this. If we want a workforce that looks like the people that we serve and the community that we live in, we have to do something different than what we've done historically to recruit and retain talent. So I believe that can be achieved through the support systems that exist. I believe it can be done between collaboration between schools and workforce. However, so many employers we talk to, we say, will you consider a high school intern? They're bilingual, they're this, that, and the other. We don't do high school. So I guess I just want to challenge thinking a little bit that if we want a different result, we have to do something different.
To answer the question, what's the business case for workforce readiness? One of the things that we talked about earlier. I have 4 points. It's the future of business. It addresses the most in-demand, hard-to-fill roles at that entry level. It keeps youth in Iowa, and it effectively provides pathways to success. So I'll leave it at that.
Hey, Mark, take us on.
I honestly don't have anything. The only thing I would just say is, I appreciate Noel, I agree with her. It's just that we have to think differently. I mean, that's just ultimately, I think we've always, when we try to sell post-secondary education, we've always said, you're gonna make more money, right? I don't know if that's always necessarily the best selling point, and I don't know what the selling point is. But it's definitely an aspect that we definitely need to think different.
Think differently, lots of collaboration. Thank you all three for your time and your expertise today. Please join me in thanking the panel.
Right. Thank you, Janae, and thank you for our panel for joining us up here today. So again, we have 4 more issue forums left on the year, with our next one June 15th on placemaking. So if you enjoyed this incredible conversation today, we'll have a continued conversation tomorrow, or excuse me, in June. I also just wanted to highlight a couple other policy events. Of course, every time we get an opportunity at our events is we will have DMDC in about 3 weeks. So for those of you who don't know, we will take a large group out to DC to advocate on the federal policy agenda. And the FAFSA Simplification Act is one of those things we will be having a conversation on, among many other priorities for the partnership. So if you're curious on joining us in that, registration is still open. Also, we will be hosting the legislative slow pitch softball game in June as well. So June 4th, following the Iowa Cubs game, it's going to be Iowa Republicans versus Iowa Democrats in a slow pitch softball game. So if you're interested in attending that, it will be June 4th, following the 1 p.m. Iowa Cubs game. So if you purchase tickets, also get to go to the Iowa Cubs game, and some of those ticket sales go to nonprofits, Helping Jake Foundation and the Iowa Food Bank Association. So it's going to be a great event. And of course, there's other policy resources out there. We have a newsletter. We have plenty of other events throughout the year. We'd love to see you guys engaged. But thank you all for joining today, and we will hopefully see you all in June. Thank you.